The announcement of departure, the great assembly hall of Nexus Prime, had never seen such chaos. Captain Elena Vasquez stood at the human delegation podium, watching as representatives from 47 different species erupted into confused babble. Her words still echoed in the vast chamber, words that had just shattered to centuries of galactic cooperation. The human coalition formally withdraws from the Galactic Assembly, effective immediately. The Taurian Federation's Admiral Crix slammed his massive fist against his delegation table, causing his translator device to spark. His bull-like features twisted with rage as he bellowed, "This is madness. Cannot simply abandon your duties." From across the hall, the ethereal forms of the Energy Collective flickered with agitation. Commander Zephyr's voice resonated through the chamber like distant thunder. "The humans have guided us for 200 cycles. They have prevented 17 wars, mediated thousands of disputes, and solved problems we thought impossible. Would they abandon us now?" Lena's dark eyes swept across the assembly. She had spent 15 years in this hall, watching these same beings work together to build something beautiful. The insectoid hive clans with their perfect coordination. The aquatic depth dwellers in their environmental suits, bringing wisdom from ocean worlds. The crystalline harmony singers, whose bodies chimed with musical communication. All of them looking at her with confusion, anger, and fear. Prime Minister Thax of the largest hive clan clicked his mandibles rapidly, a sign of extreme distress. His compound eyes reflected the chamber's lights as he spoke through his translation implant. "Captain Vasquez, your species has been the backbone of galactic civilization. You solve problems that divide us. You find connections where we see only differences. Without you, we will fall apart." Elena knew he was right. Humans had filled a unique role in galactic society. While other species excelled in specific areas, the hive clans and organization, the Energy Collective and technology, the depth dwellers and philosophy, humans somehow bridged all the gaps. They were the translators, the mediators, the ones who could see solutions when everyone else saw only problems. Dr. Marcus Chen, Elena's chief science advisor, stepped forward. His weathered face showed the strain of keeping their secret for months. "The decision has been made," he said quietly. "All human colonies are being evacuated as we speak. Our trade agreements are void. Our research partnerships are dissolved. We wish you well, but we can no longer be part of this assembly." Scholar Neith, the ancient keeper of knowledge whose species lived for thousands of years, raised her crystalline hand. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of centuries. "In all my long life, I have never seen a species abandon prosperity for uncertainty. What drives this decision? What threat do you flee from?" Elena's jaw tightened. She could not tell. Them about the signals detected at the galaxy's edge? She could not explain the deep space monitoring stations that had gone silent one by one. She could not reveal the ancient records discovered and dead. Civilizations that spoke of something called the silence that consumed entire galactic communities. To tell them would only make things worse. "There is no threat," Elena lied smoothly. "We have simply decided that humanity's future lies elsewhere." Ambassador Kell, of the diplomatic corps, whose tentacled form rippled with emotion, spoke with barely controlled desperation. "The Zephyrian-Corvin conflict in the Outer Rim. Without human mediation, it will explode into full war. Millions will die." The supply chain crisis affecting 12 systems added another representative. Human logistics coordinators were the only ones who understood the complex interdependencies. The plague outbreak on Harmony 7 called out a third voice. Human medical researchers were close to a breakthrough. Lena closed her eyes briefly. Each problem they mentioned had been carefully cataloged by human analysts. Withdrawal would indeed cause suffering, but it was necessary. The alternative was the complete extinction of everyone in the galaxy. "We are sorry," she said, and meant it. "But our decision is final." The chamber erupted again. Species that had been allies for centuries began shouting at each other. Old grievances surfacing now that the human peacekeepers were abandoning their posts. The elegant harmony singers' musical voices clashed with the guttural roars of the mountain clan representatives. The hive clans clicking became frantic as they tried to process this unprecedented situation. Admiral Crix stood to his full height. nearly 3 meters of muscle and fury. If you will not fulfill your obligations, then the Taurian Federation will take control of galactic security. Will maintain order. Commander Zephyr's energy form flared brighter. The Energy Collective will not submit to Taurian military rule. We have rights that predate your species' membership in this assembly. Rights mean nothing without the strength to enforce them, Crix growled back. Alina watched the first cracks appear in galactic unity. Without human mediation, the old tribal instincts were already surfacing. It was happening faster than even their worst projections had predicted. Dr. Chen touched her arm. Evacuation. Fleets are reporting successful departures from all major human settlements, he whispered. Phase 1 is complete. Lena nodded. Over the past 6 months, while maintaining their normal diplomatic facade, humans had been quietly preparing for this moment. Every human colony had built secret evacuation ships. Every human family had been given coordinates for remote rendezvous points. Every human scientist, engineer, doctor, and teacher had been briefed on their role in the desperate plan ahead. They were not abandoning the galaxy out of selfishness, or sacrificing everything they had built to give everyone a chance at survival. Prime Minister Thax approached the human podium, his insect-like form moving with surprising grace. Captain Vasquez, I have known you for 7 years. You negotiated the peace treaty that ended the Hive War. You found the cure for the genetic plague that was killing my people's larvae. You are not cruel or selfish. Tell me the truth. What is coming? Lena looked into his compound eyes and felt her resolve waver. Thax had become a friend over the years. They'd shared meals, discussed philosophy, even attended each other's cultural celebrations. The thought of leaving him to face what was coming made her sick. But telling him would only doom him faster. I am sorry, old friend, she said softly. But some truths are too dangerous to share. She turned and walked toward the exit, Dr. Chen beside her. Behind them, the Grand Assembly Hall descended into chaos. 46 species began arguing about everything they had previously agreed upon. Trade routes, territorial boundaries, resource allocation agreements. All of it started unraveling the moment humans stopped being there to hold it together. As they reached the corridor outside the hall, Alina heard the first official declaration of hostility. The mountain clans were severing diplomatic relations with the Aquatic Federation over a mining dispute that humans had mediated just 3 months earlier. How long do you think we have? Dr. Chen asked quietly. Alina checked her chronometer. Based on their models, galactic civilization would begin collapsing within weeks of their departure. Wars would break out. Trade would stop. The unity that had taken centuries to build would shatter in months. Maybe, just maybe, that chaos would save some of them when the silence arrived. 6 months, she said. Maybe 8 if we're lucky. Then the silence will find a broken galaxy instead of a unified one. Scattered groups instead of a single large target. They walked toward the docking bay where the last human transport waited. Behind them, the voices from the assembly hall grew louder and angrier. Species that had been friends were becoming enemies. The galactic community was dying, and Alina Vasquez had just delivered the killing blow. But as they boarded their ship and lifted off from Nexus Prime, Alina held onto one hope. Scattered across the galaxy were small groups of survivors from each species, individuals that humans had quietly relocated to hidden colonies over the past months. Scientists, artists, philosophers, teachers, the best and brightest from every world, secretly saved to preserve their cultures when the darkness came. The Galactic Assembly was ending, but the story of galactic civilization was not over. It was just beginning a new chapter, one written in the shadows and hidden from the ancient hunger that stalked between the stars. As their ship jumped to hyperspace, Alina took one last look at Nexus Prime. The great station that had been the center of galactic civilization for 2 centuries was already showing signs of discord. Ships from different species were departing separately instead of in the coordinated convoys that had been standard for decades. The galaxy was holding its breath, and humanity had just taught it how to scatter and hide. Now they could only hope it would be enough. The galaxy crumbles without human guidance. 6 months had passed since the humans abandoned the Galactic Assembly, and Admiral Crick stared at the tactical display aboard his flagship with growing horror. Red markers filled the holographic map of the galaxy, each one representing an active conflict zone. What had started as minor disputes was now spiraling into full-scale wars. Report from the Outer Rim called his communications officer, Lieutenant Vex. The Zephyrian-Corvin conflict has expanded. 3 more systems have been drawn into the fighting. Civilian casualties are approaching 2 million. Crix's massive hands clenched into fists. Before the humans left, such conflicts were resolved. In weeks, through careful negotiation, Lena Vasquez had personally mediated the Zephyrian-Corvin disputes dozens of times, finding compromises that both sides could accept. Now, without human mediators, old hatreds burned brighter than ever. "What about the supply chain crisis?" Crix asked, though he already knew the answer would be bad. 12 systems are facing critical shortages, Vex reported. The trade routes that humans organized have completely collapsed. Species are hoarding resources instead of sharing them. The Harmony Singers are refusing to export their crystal technology. The Depth Dwellers have cut off all surface world trade. The Admiral turned away from the display the Taurian Federation had tried to fill. The void left by humanity. But they lacked the humans' strange ability to see connections between seemingly unrelated problems. Where humans saw opportunities for cooperation, other species only saw competition and threat. Across the galaxy, on the ancient library world of Axiom, Skull-Neath was discovering just how dependent galactic civilization had become on human innovation. She floated through the vast archives, a crystalline form casting rainbow patterns on the walls as she searched through centuries of records. "The patterns are clear," she murmured to her research assistant, a young Hive clan member named Worker Scribe Zilks. "Every major breakthrough in the past 2 centuries has human involvement. The unified translation protocols that allow our species to communicate, the medical advances that eliminated 17 different plagues, the energy distribution networks that power half the galaxy." Zilks's compound eyes reflected his confusion. "But surely other species contributed to these discoveries?" Nith pulled up a holographic timeline showing major galactic achievements. "Of course they did. But look at the pattern. The Depth Dwellers would develop the theoretical framework. The Energy Collective would provide the power source. The Hive clans would organize the implementation. But it was always humans who connected these separate pieces into something greater than the sum of its parts. The implications were staggering. Without humans to bridge the gaps between different species' strengths, the galaxy's technological and social progress had ground to a halt. Worse, existing systems were beginning to fail as species lost the ability to work together on maintenance and improvements. Scholar Neath Zilk said quietly, "I have been monitoring the communication networks. There are rumors that some groups have been tracking human evacuation routes." Nith's crystalline body chimed with concern. Meanwhile, in the depths of space, Captain Sarah Mitchell commanded the human evacuation fleet from the bridge of the vessel New Horizon. 200 ships carrying the entire human population moved through the void between galaxies, following routes planned years in advance. "Long-range sensors are detecting pursuit," reported her navigation officer, Lieutenant James Park.
"Multiple
"Species have joined together to track us. They're 3 weeks behind, but they're gaining." Sarah had expected this. As the galaxy fell apart, desperate species would eventually try to force the humans to return. They didn't understand that humanity's departure wasn't abandonment, it was sacrifice. "Any word from the deep space monitoring stations?" she asked. "Communications?" Officer Lisa Wong checked her instruments. "Station 7 went silent yesterday. That makes 12 stations we've lost contact with in the past month. Whatever destroyed them is moving toward the galactic core." Sarah nodded grimly. The monitoring stations had been humanity's early warning system. It's placed in the empty space between galaxies to watch for the approach of something they had discovered in ancient ruins on dead worlds. Something that had consumed entire galactic civilizations throughout cosmic history. The silence. Back on Nexus Prime, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. Ambassador Kell of the Diplomatic Corps found himself mediating between increasingly hostile factions at the Grand Assembly Hall. Once a place of cooperation and progress, had become a battlefield of words that threatened to become a battlefield of weapons. The Energy Collective's blockade of Taurian supply lines is an act of war, Admiral Crix declared, his voice booming through the chamber. We demand immediate cessation of these hostile activities. Commander Zephyr's energy form flared with indignation. The Taurian Federation's military buildup threatens the sovereignty of 17 peaceful systems. We will not allow your expansion to continue unchecked. Ambassador Kell raised his tentacled arms for attention. Honored representatives, we must find a peaceful solution. This is exactly the kind of conflict that human mediators would have resolved through compromise. The humans are gone. Prime Minister Thax clicked angrily. They abandoned us to this chaos. We must learn to solve these problems ourselves. But that was the issue. For 2 centuries, humans had been the glue holding galactic civilization together. They had prevented wars, facilitated trade, enabled scientific collaboration, somehow made species with completely different biologies and psychologies work toward common goals. Without them, the galaxy was reverting to tribalism. Scholar. Nith arrived at Nexus Prime, carrying data that would change everything. She'd spent months researching human activities in the years before their departure, looking for clues about their motivations. What she had found was terrifying. I call for an emergency session, she announced as she entered the assembly hall. I have discovered why the humans left. The chaotic arguing stopped. Every representative turned to listen as the ancient scholar activated her data projector. 3 years ago, human deep space expeditions discovered ruins on the planet Kepler-4. For 2b, she began. These ruins belong to a civilization that existed 50 million years ago. A civilization that spanned an entire galaxy. The holographic display showed images of vast, dead cities, built by beings unlike anything in current galactic civilization. The ruins contained records, Nith continued. Records of something the ancient civilization called the Silence. Entity or force that appears between galaxies every few million years, seeking out advanced civilizations. Commander Zephyr's energy form flickered with concern. What happened to this ancient civilization? They were consumed, Nith said simply. Not destroyed, consumed. Transformed into something else entirely. The Silence feeds unorganized, interconnected civilizations. The more advanced and unified a galactic community becomes, the more attractive it is as a target. The assembly hall fell silent. Admiral? Crix was the first to speak. You're saying the humans detected this threat and fled? Worse, Neith replied. I believe they detected the threat and deliberately broke apart our civilization to save it. She showed them data from human deep space monitoring stations, carefully hidden records that painted a terrifying picture. The Silence had already consumed the Andromeda galaxy. It was moving toward their galaxy, drawn by the psychic emanations of billions of thinking beings working together. The humans faced an impossible choice, Nith explained. They could warn us and help us prepare a unified defense, which would only make us a more attractive target. Or they could shatter our civilization, scatter us into smaller groups that might be too insignificant for the Silence to notice. Ambassador Kell's tentacles writhed with understanding and horror. They sacrificed themselves to save us, abandoned everything they built here to give us a chance. But why not tell us? Prime Minister Thax demanded. Why not explain the danger? Because telling us would have defeated the purpose, Scholar Nith said sadly. If we had known about the Silence, we would have banded together to fight it. We would have created exactly the kind of unified resistance that attracts its attention. The representatives looked at each other with new understanding. Wars, the collapsed trade routes, the failed cooperation, all of it was actually protecting them by making their civilization appear broken and scattered. How long do we have? Admiral Crix asked quietly. Nith checked her data. Based on the pattern of lost monitoring stations, the Silence will reach our galaxy within the next few months. Meanwhile, Captain Sarah Mitchell received the news she had been dreading. Long-range sensors confirm it, reported Lieutenant Park. Massive energy signatures approaching the galaxy's edge. The Silence has arrived. Sarah looked at her crew volunteers who had given up everything to save people, who would never thank them. Signal all ships. Begin Phase 2 of the evacuation protocol. Phase 2, asked Communications Officer Wong. We go back, Sarah said firmly. The galaxy is broken and scattered now, which should protect most populations from the silence. But some groups will still be too large, too organized. We need to save who we can. The human fleet turned around, heading back toward the galaxy they had abandoned. Behind them, in the void between galaxies, something vast and hungry began to feed. Back on Nexus Prime, Scholar Nith's revelation had changed everything. The angry voices had fallen silent as representatives realized the magnitude of what the humans had done. They had given up their homes, their achievements, their place in galactic society, all to save civilizations that would hate them for it. We must prepare, Ambassador Kell said finally. The silence is coming. We need to evacuate the largest population centers. No, Prime Minister Thack said firmly. We must trust the humans' plan. They scattered us for a reason. Any large-scale coordination now might attract the very attention we're trying to avoid. It was a bitter irony. To survive, galactic civilization had to remain broken. They had to resist every instinct to work together, to help each other, to rebuild what they had lost. Unity meant death. Division meant survival. As reports came in of strange energy signatures at the galaxy's edge, as Outer Rim colonies went silent one by one, the representatives of 46 species faced the hardest choice in galactic history. Trust in humanity's sacrifice and stay. Divided or follow their nature and unite in the face of danger. The silence was coming, and the galaxy's only hope lay in remaining broken. The hidden truth and final sacrifice. General Rebecca Stone stood on the bridge of the human command vessel. Defiance, watching through the viewports as the silence consumed another star system. Where moments before there had been the bright glow of a sun and the gentle lights of inhabited worlds, now there was something worse than darkness. There was emptiness that seemed to pull light into itself, creating wounds in space itself. Kepler 778. System is gone, reported her tactical officer, Commander David Park. That's the 15th system consumed in the past week. The pattern is accelerating. Rebecca had spent her entire military career preparing for conventional wars. She understood strategy, logistics, and tactics. But this was something beyond. Warfare. The silence wasn't conquering the galaxy. It was digesting it. Any word from the rescue teams? She asked. Operation Lifeline is proceeding, David replied. Captain Mitchell's fleet has successfully evacuated refugees from 47 systems. But we're running out of time and transport capacity. Months had passed since the silence entered their galaxy. Just as the humans had predicted, it was drawn to the largest concentrations of organized civilization. The great trade hubs went first, then the major population centers, then the military installations. But the scattered colonies, the broken alliances, the divided species, these it largely ignored. Dismissing them as insignificant, the human plan was working, but at a terrible cost, from her hidden command center on a rogue planet drifting. In the void between star systems, Rebecca coordinated the most complex rescue operation in galactic history. Human ships emerged from hiding to extract survivors from doomed worlds, racing against time to save individuals and small groups while avoiding the attention of the silence. Priority transmission from Scholar Nith, announced Communications Officer Alina Torres. She's requesting immediate evacuation from Axiom. The silence has detected the library world. Rebecca's heart sank. Axiom contained the cultural and scientific knowledge of 46 different species. Its loss would be devastating to any hope of rebuilding galactic civilization after the silence passed. Dispatch Rescue Team 7, she ordered. Tell them they have 36 hours before the system becomes too dangerous to enter. Captain Sarah Mitchell received the evacuation order while her ship, New Horizon, was already extracting refugees from the crystalline world of Harmonic Prime. Her cargo bays were filled with beings from a dozen different species, scientists, artists, teachers, and children. The best and brightest from civilizations that were about to be consumed. Set course for Axiom, she told her navigator. Maximum speed. The journey to the library world took 18 hours of desperate flight, through space that was becoming increasingly twisted by the silence's presence. Reality itself seemed to bend around the ancient force, creating navigation hazards that defied conventional physics. When they arrived at Axiom, they found Scholar Naish waiting with a small group of researchers and the most critical data archives. The ancient crystalline being's usually brilliant form was dim with exhaustion and grief. "How much time do we have?" Sarah asked, as refugees boarded her ship. "The silence will reach this system within 12 hours, Nith replied. "We have saved what we can of the accumulated knowledge, but so much will be lost." As the new horizon departed Axiom, Sarah looked back to see the first tendrils of the silence reaching into the system. The vast entity didn't simply destroy, it transformed, turning matter and energy into something alien and wrong. Planets became geometric shapes that hurt to look at. Stars became sources of darkness instead of light. Back on her command ship, General Rebecca Stone received reports from across the galaxy. The silence was methodically consuming every major center of civilization. But exactly as predicted, it was ignoring the scattered remnants. Broken trade routes meant survival. Failed alliances meant life. General called David Park urgently. "Receiving a transmission? It's not from any of our ships. Put it through." The communication that came through was unlike anything they had ever heard. It wasn't words or music or any form of expression from a known species. It was something that spoke directly to the mind. Bypassing language entirely, we acknowledged the cleverness of the small voices, the communication said. "You have broken your song to preserve its echoes. Most voices sing louder. Me approach. You have chosen silence." Rebecca felt ice in her veins. The silence was communicating with them. After months of treating it as a force of nature, they now realized it was intelligent. "Your species shows wisdom. We will remember this when we have finished our harvest. Some fragments may remain too. Sing new songs." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge crew in stunned silence. It's talking to us," Alina Torres whispered. "The silence is actually intelligent. It chose to consume those civilizations." Rebecca understood now with crystal clarity. Silence wasn't a natural disaster. It was a cosmic gardener, periodically pruning galactic civilizations to prevent them from growing too large, too connected, too unified. Humanity had inadvertently done exactly what the silence would have done anyway, broken apart an overgrown galactic community. Sir David Park reported we're getting priority signals from refugee fleets across the galaxy. The scattered populations are asking for guidance. They want to know if they should reunite, rebuild the old alliances. This was the critical moment. The silence was nearly finished with its harvest of the major civilizations. Soon, it would move on 2 other galaxies, leaving behind a fragmented collection of survivors. What happened next would determine whether galactic civilization could be rebuilt or whether the scattered groups would remain isolated forever. Rebecca activated the galaxy-wide communication network that humans had secretly maintained throughout their exile. "This is General Rebecca Stone to all survivors," she broadcast. "The immediate danger is passing, so the silence will soon depart our galaxy. But we must not repeat the mistakes of the past." Across hundreds of scattered colonies and refugee fleets, beings from 46 different species listened to the human commander who had coordinated their salvation. "We cannot rebuild the old galactic assembly," Rebecca continued. "A single, unified civilization will only attract the silence when it returns in a few million years. Instead, we must create something new. Multiple smaller communities, each independent but connected by trade, culture, and friendship." On the bridge of the refugee vessel carrying survivors from Nexus Prime, Ambassador Kell translated Rebecca's words for the mixed group of species. Under his care, Prime Minister Thax, Admiral Crix, and Commander Zephyr sat together. Former enemies united by shared loss and newfound understanding. "She's right," Thax said quietly. "The humans saved us by teaching us that sometimes the greatest strength comes from knowing when to scatter rather than stand together." Admiral Crix nodded slowly. "My people always believed that unity meant strength. But But perhaps there are different kinds of strength. Commander Zephyr's energy form pulsed thoughtfully. The energy collective has always shared power freely, but we never considered that connection itself could be dangerous. As the silence consumed the last of the major population centers and began to withdraw from the galaxy, human rescue fleets worked tirelessly to establish new colonies for the survivors. But these weren't the massive cities and unified governments of the old galactic civilization. Instead, they were smaller communities, each containing members of multiple species but maintaining independence from larger networks. Scholar Nith, now serving as the keeper of the combined archives of galactic knowledge, helped establish the new guidelines for civilization. "We will preserve the knowledge and cultures of all our species," she announced, "but we will do so in many small libraries rather than one great archive. We will trade and communicate, but we will avoid the kind of deep integration that made us a target." Months passed. The silence moved beyond their galaxy, seeking its next harvest among the distant star clusters. The survivors began to build new lives, creating communities that honored their past while learning from their mistakes. Captain Sarah Mitchell established a medical colony on a world at the galaxy's edge, bringing together healers from different species to preserve medical knowledge without creating a centralized healthcare system. Engineer David Park helped design communication networks that allowed trade and cultural exchange, while preventing the kind of deep integration that had made the old civilization vulnerable. On a small world that would never appear on any major star charts, representatives from multiple species gathered for what they called the New Assembly. It wasn't a government or a formal alliance. It was simply a place where different groups could meet, trade, share knowledge, and remember. General Rebecca Stone addressed this first gathering of the scattered civilization. "We have learned that there are things in the universe larger and older than we imagined," she said. "We have learned that sometimes survival requires sacrifice, and wisdom requires humility. The humans gave up their place in galactic society to save that society from destruction." She paused, looking at the mixed group of beings who had once been part of a unified galactic civilization and were now learning to be something new. "We cannot bring back what was lost. The great cities, the vast trade networks, the unified government, these things attracted danger from the void between galaxies. But we can build something better, something more resilient, something that preserves the best of what we were, while avoiding the mistakes that nearly destroyed us." Admiral Crix stood to respond. "The Taurian Federation formally dissolves its claim to galactic authority. We'll become part of this new way, partners rather than rulers." One by one, the representatives of different groups made similar declarations. The old hierarchy was dead. In its place grew something unprecedented. A galactic civilization based on voluntary cooperation rather than formal unity. Years later, as trade routes reopened and cultural exchange resumed between the scattered communities, children who had been born after the silence would ask their elders about the old days. They would hear stories of a time when all the species of the galaxy lived under one government, in one great civilization that spanned countless worlds. And they would be told that sometimes the greatest act of love is letting go, that humanity had taught them there was more than one way to be strong, and that wisdom sometimes meant choosing to be scattered rather than united. The galaxy was quieter now, broken into countless small voices instead of one great song. But it was alive, and it was learning, and it was growing in new directions that the silence might never think to harvest. In the end, humanity's greatest gift to galactic civilization wasn't their problem-solving skills or their diplomatic abilities. It was their willingness to sacrifice everything they had built to teach the galaxy how to survive. The stars still shone, the world still turned. And somewhere in the scattered communities of a rebuilt galactic civilization, the spirit of cooperation lived on, tempered by wisdom, guided by humility, and protected by the knowledge that sometimes the greatest strength comes from knowing when to stand apart.